The comment appeared on my phone screen at 7:03 p.m., posted by my own son for 847 people to see. Mom redeemed her $25 gift card in record time, LOL. Amber's mom literally tried to refuse the European cruise we gave her. Just different values, I guess. I was standing in his kitchen, wearing my dead husband's faded apron, preparing a feast for my 62nd birthday that I hadn't asked for. The herb-crusted lamb was ready. The lobster bisque was simmering. My hands were raw from scrubbing, and my son had just told our entire family I was greedy. 20 minutes later, I turned off every burner, walked out his front door with a single suitcase, and disappeared. What he didn't know was that I'd just loaned them $75,000 from my retirement. What he didn't know was that my lawyer's number was already in my phone. What he didn't know was that the house he told me to sell was about to make me a millionaire. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning of that day, the day everything changed. The morning of my 62nd birthday started the way every morning had started for the past 4 years. At 6 a.m., my alarm pierced through the darkness of the guest room that had become my permanent residence in my son Brandon's house in Denver. Not my room, the guest room. That distinction mattered more than I'd ever admitted to myself. I lay there for a moment in the gray pre-dawn light, listening to the silence of a house still asleep. In a few minutes, that silence would shatter. Brandon's alarm would go off, then Amber's, then the thunder of 7-year-old Mason's feet hitting the floor. The television would blare, the coffee maker would hiss, the chaos would begin. And I would be the stage manager of it all, invisible but indispensable. I pushed myself out of bed, my knees protesting. 62 years old, and I felt every single one of them in my bones. Not because of age, but because of exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes from being needed but not valued, from being essential but invisible. I pulled on my worn jeans and the soft sweater that had been Tony's favorite, the one he said made my eyes look like warm chocolate. Tony, my husband of 38 years, gone 5 years now, taken by a heart attack that came without warning on a Tuesday afternoon while he was mowing the lawn. One moment he was there, solid and real and mine. The next, he was gone. And I had been untethered ever since. The bathroom mirror showed me a woman I barely recognized anymore. Brown hair gone more gray than not, pulled back in a practical ponytail. Lines around my eyes that hadn't been there when I'd taught high school English in Cleveland. When I'd had my own house, my own life, my own identity beyond mother and grandmother and unpaid domestic staff. I splashed water on my face and headed to the kitchen, Tony's old apron already in my hands. It was faded floral. The ties frayed, a relic from our real kitchen back in Ohio. I tied it around my waist like armor. The kitchen was massive and modern, all gleaming quartz countertops and stainless steel appliances that I still didn't fully understand how to operate. It was Amber's dream kitchen, featured prominently in her lifestyle blog and Instagram feed. Everything about this house was designed for the camera, for the carefully curated image of the perfect family living the perfect Denver life. I was the behind-the-scenes crew that made it all possible. On the counter, exactly where Amber had left it the night before, was a printed menu for today's birthday dinner. My birthday dinner. Typed in that crisp, corporate font Amber loved, complete with prep times and plating instructions. Herb-crusted rack of lamb with rosemary juice. For Brandon, who was on his latest dietary kick, lobster bisque with cognac cream. For Lorraine Preston, Amber's mother, who claimed to have a delicate palate, truffle mac and cheese. For Mason, though he'd probably eat 3 bites and declare he wasn't hungry, arugula salad with candied pecans and goat cheese. For Amber's Instagram, gluten-free chocolate lava cakes. For their friend Stephanie, who was sensitive to everything but gossip, and roasted fingerling potatoes, the only thing on the entire menu that I actually wanted to eat. Tony used to say I could solve any problem with a potato. Mashed potatoes for sadness, roasted potatoes for celebration, potato soup for illness, French fries for rebellion. I wish desperately that he were here now. He would have taken one look at that pretentious menu, tossed it in the trash, and ordered us the biggest, greasiest pizza in Denver. We would have eaten it on the couch in our sweatpants, watching old movies and laughing at nothing in particular. But Tony was gone, and I was here, in a kitchen that wasn't mine, cooking food I didn't choose, for a party I didn't want, while the people I'd sacrificed everything for slept peacefully upstairs. I began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, my movements automatic. I'd been doing this for 4 years now. 4 years since Brandon had called me, his voice tight with barely concealed panic, and asked if I could come stay with them for a little while. Just until they got settled, just until they figured out the childcare situation, just until Amber's business took off. I'd said yes, of course. I was a mother. That's what mothers do. They say yes. They show up. They sacrifice. I'd sold half my furniture, put the rest in storage, rented out my paid-off house in Cleveland, and moved across the country. Temporarily, I'd told myself, just for a few months. 4 years later, I was still here, still in the guest room, still waiting for the temporary arrangement to end. The numbers ran through my head as I chopped vegetables, a grim accounting I'd been keeping in a spreadsheet hidden deep in my laptop files. $2,500 a month from my pension toward their mortgage, $600 a month for groceries because Amber's $400 allowance never stretched far enough for organic, grass-fed, locally sourced everything. $75,000 loaned for Lorraine Preston's 60th birthday party last year, a country club affair with a string quartet and catered food from the most expensive Italian restaurant in Denver, plus the European cruise that followed, 3 weeks in the Mediterranean that Lorraine documented exhaustively on social media while I stayed home and took care of Mason. My calculator had long since given up trying to make sense of it. $195,000 over 4 years. My retirement savings, my emergency fund, my rainy day money, all of it funneled into maintaining Brandon and Amber's lifestyle. They called it helping out, chipping in, family supporting family. I called it what it was. Theft dressed up in the language of love. But I never said that out loud. Good mothers don't keep score. Good mothers give freely. Good mothers sacrifice without resentment. I'd been trying to be a good mother my entire life. At 7:30, I heard the first footsteps above me. The house was waking up. I put Mason's elaborate bento box lunch together, carefully arranging the sandwich cut into dinosaur shapes, the organic strawberries, the homemade granola bars. Amber photographed these lunches for her Instagram. #blessed, #grateful, #best grandma ever. I'd never been called grandma by Mason. Amber had decided early on that it made her feel old. So Mason called me Diane, and he called Lorraine, who saw him maybe once a month, Grandma Lorraine. Brandon came down first, already dressed in his business casual uniform, tapping on his phone. 38 years old, my only child. The boy I'd raised alone after his father left when Brandon was 3. I'd worked 2 jobs to put him through college, sacrificed vacations and new clothes and any semblance of a social life to give him opportunities I'd never had. He looked at me the way you look at furniture, present but unremarkable. "Morning, Mom," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Amber will be down in a minute. She wanted me to remind you that Lorraine prefers her bisque on the warmer side and make sure the lamb is medium rare. Dad doesn't eat anything overcooked." Dad. He called his father-in-law Dad now, the man who showed up for holidays and left before cleanup. Meanwhile, I'd been here for 4 years, and I couldn't remember the last time Brandon had hugged me. "I'll make sure it's perfect," I said quietly. He nodded, still not looking at me, and poured himself coffee. "You're still planning to list your house in Cleveland this week, right? We really need to move forward with the kitchen renovation. The countertops Amber wants are back-ordered for 3 months. My house, the house Tony and I had bought 35 years ago, the house where I'd raised Brandon. The house that was paid off and mine, and the only thing I had left that was truly my own. They wanted me to sell it so they could renovate their already perfect kitchen. "I'll call the realtor today," I heard myself say. The words came out automatically, a reflex I'd developed over 4 years of saying yes to everything. "Great. Thanks, Mom." He grabbed his coffee and headed toward his home office without another word. Amber came down 20 minutes later, already camera-ready in her athleisure wear, her highlighted hair perfectly tousled. She was beautiful in that expensive, high-maintenance way that took hours to achieve, but was meant to look effortless. "Good morning, Diane," she said, her voice bright and friendly in that way that always felt like a performance. "Oh, you're wearing Tony's apron again. That's so sweet. You know, I saw the cutest aprons at Anthropology last week, very farmhouse chic. I should get you one for Christmas. Translation: your dead husband's apron embarrasses me in my designer kitchen." "This one works just fine," I said, my hands busy with the potatoes. She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. Did you get the email I sent with the updated timeline? Lorraine is coming at 5 instead of 6, so we'll need to move dinner up an hour." I hadn't checked my email. Another item added to the invisible labor list. "I'll adjust," I said. "Perfect. You're such a lifesaver, Diane. Honestly, I don't know what we'd do without you." She poured herself a green smoothie from the refrigerator, the one I'd made the night before according to her specific recipe. "Have you given any more thought to that house situation? Brandon mentioned you were going to call the realtor today." There it was, the gentle pressure disguised as casual conversation. This was how Amber operated. She never demanded. She never raised her voice. She just smiled and suggested and hinted until you found yourself agreeing to things you'd never intended to agree to. "I'm planning to make the call this afternoon," I said. "Wonderful. We're just so excited about the renovation. This kitchen is nice, but it's not quite what we envisioned for the long term. And with your house money, we can finally make it exactly what we want. Plus, the realtor said you should get a good price. Maybe $200,000? $200,000. My house was worth at least $300,000, probably more." But I didn't correct her. I never corrected Amber. "We'll see what the market says," I replied. She nodded, already scrolling through her phone. "Oh, and I meant to tell you, I posted the sweetest throwback photo of you and Brandon from when he was moving to Denver. I tagged you. Did you see it?" My stomach tightened. "Not yet. Check it out when you get a chance. So many people commented about how grateful Brandon is to have you." She smiled at me again. That bright, empty smile. "You're just the best, Diane." She glided out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my raw hands and my breaking heart. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking slightly. The Facebook notification glowed on the screen. "Brandon tagged you in a post." I tapped it open, already bracing myself. Amber's social media posts were always carefully curated narratives, designed to show the world a version of our family that existed only in photographs. The picture was from 5 years ago, taken the day I'd helped Brandon pack up his apartment to move to Denver. I looked exhausted in the photo, circles dark under my eyes, hair a mess, wearing Tony's old college sweatshirt. The fluorescent lighting of the storage unit was unforgiving. Next to me, Amber was radiant, posed as if a professional photographer were hiding behind a stack of boxes. The caption was written in Amber's signature style, effusive and corporate and completely devoid of genuine emotion. "Happy 62nd to the best mom a guy could ask for. Words can't express how grateful we are for everything you do. Sent a little something to your email so you can treat yourself to your favorite latte. Love you to the moon and back. Little something." The phrase landed in my stomach like a stone. I swiped out of Facebook and opened my email with trembling fingers. There it was. Subject line: "Amber sent you a gift." I clicked it open. A Starbucks e-gift card. $25. I stared at the cheerful green logo, the picture of the steaming paper cup. $25. Enough for maybe 4 overpriced lattes. The kind of gift you give a coworker you barely know. the mailman at Christmas, your kid's teacher at the end of the school year, not your mother, not the woman who'd given you $195,000 over 4 years, not the woman who'd raised you alone and sacrificed everything. $25. It wasn't the amount. It wasn't really about the money at all. It was the sheer breathtaking thoughtlessness of it. It was a 30-second transaction, a task checked off a to-do list. Send mom birthday thing. Done. My phone buzzed again. Another Facebook notification. I felt a sense of dread as I tapped back to the app. It was my sister Linda commenting from Cleveland. Linda Castellano Hayes. Happy birthday, Diane. You don't look a day over 40. What a sweet post, Amber. I managed a weak smile. Then I saw the typing indicator. Brandon was replying. My thumb hovered over the screen. I couldn't look away. Some morbid curiosity compelled me to stay and witness my own execution. The reply appeared. Brandon Castellano at Linda Castellano Hayes. Thanks, Aunt Linda. Mom redeemed her gift card in record time, LOL. Funny. Amber's mom is the complete opposite. We tried to give her a fully paid European cruise for her 60th last year, and she literally tried to rip up the tickets. Said her only gift was having her family healthy and happy. Just different values, I guess. The screen blurred. My hand, still holding the phone, began to tremble. Different values. The hiss of the onions I'd been sautéing faded into a dull roar in my ears. The world narrowed to that single casually cruel comment. It wasn't a dagger in the back. It was a scalpel, wielded with a surgeon's precision in a brightly lit public operating theater. 847 people could see this, our entire extended family, my old friends from Cleveland, my former colleagues from the high school where I'd taught for 30 years, everyone I'd ever known. They would all see me painted as the greedy, grabby mother, and Lorraine Preston as the selfless, saintly matriarch. My mind, that loyal secretary that had spent a lifetime filing away slights and justifications, began pulling documents from its archives. I saw the email from 2 weeks ago. Automatic payment of $2,500 to Denver Mortgage Company has been processed. That was the contribution from my pension that I sent every month to help with their crushing mortgage. Amber called it chipping in. I saw the grocery receipt from yesterday crumpled in my purse. $332.18 from Whole Foods, organic chicken, grass-fed beef, kale that cost more per pound than the pot roast I'd grown up eating. Amber would hand me $400 at the beginning of each month for groceries and then act like she was single-handedly funding a 5-star restaurant. Don't forget to get that wild-caught salmon Lorraine likes, she'd say, as if it materialized from thin air. The $400 never lasted past the second week. The rest came from my pension, from the money I was supposed to be saving for my own old age. And then the most vivid memory slid into view, sharp and painful as broken glass. Lorraine's 60th birthday party last year. It wasn't a home-cooked meal I'd slaved over. It was a catered affair at the Cherry Hills Country Club. A string quartet played in the corner. Waiters in tuxedos served champagne. Amber and Lorraine had worn matching designer dresses, a mother-daughter vision in silk and pearls. And I remembered the conversation a month before that in this very kitchen. "Mom, we just want to do something really special for Lorraine," Amber had said, twisting a strand of her expensive balayage hair around her finger. "She's done so much for us." "What?" I'd wanted to scream. "What has she done?" In the 4 years I'd lived here, Lorraine had babysat Mason exactly 3 times, each time for no more than 2 hours. Her version of helping out was showing up with a box of designer cupcakes, taking 100 photos for her Instagram feed, and breezing out the door before anyone needed an actual diaper changed. I was the one who'd done the potty training, the 2 a.m. fever checks, the endless loads of laundry, the parent-teacher conferences, the school pickup every single day for 4 years. "The thing is," Amber had continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "we're a little cash poor right now, but we saw that your 10-year CD just matured. If we could just borrow $75,000 just to give her the party she deserves, we'll pay you back. I swear, we'll pay you back as soon as Brandon's next bonus comes through. $75,000, a significant piece of my nest egg. The money Tony and I had scraped together. The safety net that was supposed to protect me from becoming a burden on my own child. I had looked at my daughter-in-law's pleading face, at my son standing behind her nodding in agreement, and I had done what I had always done. I'd said yes. I had transferred the money the next day. They never called it a loan again. They called it my contribution. At the party, I'd felt like a ghost. Dressed in my simple black dress from Talbot's, I'd stood by the appetizer table while Amber gave a gushing toast to the most selfless, generous, and supportive woman I know, my mother-in-law, Lorraine. I'd watched my grandson, Mason, sitting in Lorraine's lap calling her Grandma. I'd been introduced to one of Brandon's colleagues, not as Brandon's mother, but as Mason's nanny. I'd corrected him gently, but the sting had lasted all night. And now, here I was, a year later, being publicly shamed for accepting a $25 gift card, being held up as the bad example, the greedy one, the one with different values, redeemed in record time. My thumb moved across the screen of its own volition. I hadn't even consciously clicked the link in Amber's email, but there it was, the Starbucks app showing a balance of $25. Muscle memory. I'd clicked it without thinking, without realizing I was loading the gun that Brandon would use to shoot my reputation in front of 847 witnesses. The final puzzle piece slid into place with an audible click in my mind. It wasn't just thoughtless, it was a trap. Amber had known I'd clicked the link. She'd counted on it. She'd loaded the gun, handed it to me, and waited for me to pull the trigger on my own character assassination. Something inside me, a tightly wound spring I'd been compressing for 62 years, finally snapped. It didn't make a loud noise. It was a quiet, clean break. The part of me that made excuses for Brandon, that told myself he was just stressed, that rationalized away the 1,000 tiny cuts, that part of me simply ceased to exist. I looked around the gleaming, impersonal kitchen, at the half-diced potatoes, at the expensive lamb marinating in its glass dish, at the printed menu with its careful instructions for someone else's idea of celebration. This wasn't my life. I was a guest star in my son's production, and my role had just been downgraded to convenient villain. With a calmness that felt utterly foreign, I turned off the stove. The hissing of the onions stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own breathing. I untied. Tony's apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. My fingers smoothed over the faded flowers one last time. "I'm sorry, Tony," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "I'm sorry I let it get this far." Then I walked to my room, the guest suite. I pulled my small carry-on suitcase from the closet, the one I'd brought when this was supposed to be temporary. I didn't pack much. A few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, the worn paperback on my nightstand, my laptop, my phone charger. I looked at the framed photos on the dresser. Mason's school picture, a photo of Brandon and me at his college graduation, both of us smiling back when I still believed we had the kind of relationship where he valued me. I left them where they were. They belonged to a different woman, a different story. Back in the kitchen, I picked up my phone. I opened my banking app, my fingers moving with newfound purpose. I navigated to the automatic payment section, found the recurring $2,500 transfer to the mortgage company. I pressed delete. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure?" I pressed yes without a moment's hesitation. Then I opened the Uber app. Destination: Denver International Airport. Pick up now. A car was 7 minutes away. I had just enough time. I walked to the front door, slipping on the comfortable walking shoes I always kept by the mat, the ones I wore for my evening walks around the neighborhood, the only time I had to myself. I didn't look back. There was nothing to look back at. You can't feel nostalgia for a place you were never really welcome. As I stood on the front porch waiting for my car, I did one last thing. I went back to that Facebook post. I saw that more relatives had added their cheerful, oblivious birthday wishes. I ignored them all. I looked at Brandon's cruel, smiling profile picture next to his comment comparing me to Lorraine. The comment that had been seen and liked by dozens of people already. And I gave it a like. Let him wonder about that. Let him try to figure out what it meant. Then I walked down the driveway to wait for my car, leaving the door to my son's beautiful house unlocked behind me. I was finally going home. Chapter 2. The Uber driver was a young man with earbuds dangling around his neck and the faint scent of air freshener and old coffee clinging to his car's interior. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes polite and distant in that way of someone who'd driven 1,000 strangers to 1,000 destinations. "Headed somewhere fun?" he asked, his voice flat with the boredom of routine small talk. For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. My life for the past 4 years had been a series of trips, but none of them for fun. Trips to the grocery store, the dry cleaner, Mason's school, his soccer practice, his doctor's appointments, errands and obligations, and the endless, invisible labor that kept everyone else's life running smoothly. This was the first trip I'd taken for myself in longer than I could remember. "I'm going home," I said, and the words felt unexpectedly solid in my mouth. "Real. Cool," he nodded, tapping his steering wheel to a beat only he could hear. We drove through the manicured suburbs of Denver, past sprawling houses with 3-car garages and professionally landscaped yards. This was the world Brandon had wanted so badly, the world he felt entitled to, the one that required my money, my labor, my life to maintain. Yet sitting in the back of this stranger's car, my single suitcase on the seat beside me, I felt that my smaller life in Cleveland, my paid-off 2-bedroom house, my pension, my quiet circle of friends, was a fortress I had foolishly abandoned. I wasn't running from a battle. I was retreating to my stronghold. The automatic doors of the airport terminal hissed open, and I stepped into the familiar, anonymous chaos of travelers. For the first time in years, I was just a woman with a suitcase. Not grandma, not mom, not the unpaid help, not Diane, who always said yes. The anonymity was a balm. No one here knew that my son had just publicly priced my worth at $25. No one knew I'd left an entire feast half prepared on expensive countertops. No one knew anything about me, and that freedom was intoxicating. I found a quiet corner near the ticketing counters and pulled out my phone one last time before the inevitable storm hit. The family text message group, the one where Amber posted cheerful updates and Brandon sent occasional demands, disguised as requests, was filled with the mundane chatter of the day. My brother-in-law had posted a picture of a fish he'd caught. A cousin was asking for a good plumber recommendation. And Brandon, just 20 minutes ago, had posted a message clearly intended for me, a digital prod to remind me of my duties. "Brandon Castellano. Lorraine's parents are on their way early. Hope everyone's hungry. Mom, did you remember to get the sparkling water Lorraine likes?" I stared at the message. He had typed that after eviscerating me on Facebook, after publicly humiliating me in front of our entire family, after comparing my values unfavorably to his saintly mother-in-law. The disconnect, the sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He had set the house on fire and was now asking me if I'd remembered to buy marshmallows. My finger hovered over the power button. I knew exactly what would happen the moment Brandon and Amber walked into that empty house. The confusion would come first, then the irritation, then the full-blown narcissistic rage, the panicked phone calls, the furious texts, the voicemails dripping with blame and guilt and accusations. I didn't have the strength to weather it in real time. Not yet. With a sense of profound relief, I held down the button and watched the screen go black. I had just created a sanctuary for myself, a 5-hour bubble of peace at 30,000 feet where no one could reach me, where no one could demand anything from me, where I could simply exist. Booking the flight was surprisingly simple. One way to Cleveland, please. The agent didn't blink at my lack of luggage, my lack of plans. This was an airport. Everyone here was running from something or toward something. I paid with my own credit card, the one I kept for emergencies. This certainly qualified. Waiting at the gate, I watched other families, grandmothers fussing over toddlers, mothers and daughters sharing a magazine, their heads bent together in easy companionship. Their casual intimacy was a language I'd never learned to speak with Brandon. A wave of grief, sharp and sudden, washed over me. It wasn't grief for the son I was leaving behind. It was grief for the son I'd never had. The one who might have called on my 62nd birthday just to talk. The one who might have seen me as a person, not a resource. The one who might have loved me for who I was instead of what I could provide. The boarding call interrupted my spiral. I found my window seat and buckled myself in, the click of the seatbelt sounding like the lock on a vault. As the plane taxied and then thundered down the runway, I felt the immense weight of Denver fall away. We broke through the low-hanging clouds into an ocean of impossible blue and blinding sunlight. Up here, above the turmoil, everything was clear. I ordered a ginger ale and a bag of pretzels. I read a few pages of my book, really read them, not just staring at words while my mind cataloged everyone else's needs. I watched the patchwork of the country scroll by beneath me, geometric fields and winding rivers, and the occasional glint of a lake. For 3 hours, no one needed anything from me. There were no meals to cook, no spills to clean up, no egos to soothe, no guilt to manage. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was the sound of my own thoughts returning to me like long-lost friends. We landed in Cleveland just after 9 p.m. The air that greeted me as I stepped off the jet bridge was different from Denver's thin, dry atmosphere. It was cooler, softer, tinged with the scent of damp earth and Lake Erie, and something that felt like memory. It smelled like home. I took a taxi to my quiet street, the one I'd lived on for 35 years. The driver dropped me off, and I stood for a moment on the sidewalk looking at my house. It was dark, of course, a little neglected around the edges. The rose bushes needed pruning. The gutters probably needed cleaning, but it was mine. The oak tree Tony and I had planted in the front yard when Brandon was a baby now towered over the roof, its branches like welcoming arms. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust, but it was a familiar stillness, the silence of a place that knew me, that held my history. I dropped my suitcase in the entryway and walked through the rooms in the dark, my hands trailing along the dusty surfaces of my own furniture. My books, Tony's favorite, armchair, the leather, worn and cracked, the faint scratches on the hardwood floor where Brandon had dragged a chair as a toddler. This house held my history, and in it, I felt myself becoming whole again. I made myself a cup of tea in my own kitchen, using my favorite mug, the one with a chip on the handle that I'd never thrown away because Tony had given it to me on our first anniversary. I sat at my own kitchen table, not as a servant, but as the master of the house. After a long while nursing the last lukewarm sips of tea, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I took a deep breath, plugged my phone into the wall charger, and turned it on. It was like activating a bomb. The phone didn't just vibrate. It convulsed in my hand, buzzing and chiming violently for nearly a full minute as the backlog of notifications flooded in. 97 missed calls. Brandon, 88. Amber, 5. Linda, 4. 152 new text messages. 9 voicemails. 72 Facebook notifications. I opened the text first, scrolling back to the beginning of the avalanche, watching the progression of panic and rage unfold in real time. Brandon, 7:05 p.m. Mom, where are you? Lorraine is here. Brandon, 7:06 p.m. This isn't funny. Are you in the bathroom? Brandon, 7:15 p.m. Okay, I'm officially pissed off. Your car is still here. Where the hell did you go? You left the stove on. A lie. I had distinctly turned it off. Brandon, 7:30 p.m. Answer your phone. Everyone is staring at me. Lorraine had to order catering. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Amber, 7:45 p.m. Diane, whatever is going on, you've made your point. You're putting Brandon in a terrible position in front of his whole family. Please just come back and we can talk about this like adults. Brandon, 8:10 p.m. We couldn't find you, so we asked the Hendersons next door. We checked their security camera footage and saw you getting into a car with a suitcase. You went to the airport, didn't you? Mom, are you insane? Brandon, 9:01 p.m. How could you do this to me on your own birthday? You are the most selfish, manipulative person I have ever met. You have ruined everything. The messages continued in that vein, a waterfall of narcissistic rage and weaponized guilt. My sister Linda's texts were laced with confused concern, clear evidence that she'd been spun a frantic, one-sided story by Brandon. I ignored them all and played the first voicemail. Brandon's voice, tight with fury, filled my quiet kitchen. Mom, I don't know what kind of sick, childish game you're playing, but it's over. You abandoned your family. You left your 7-year-old grandson wondering where his grandmother went. You humiliated me in front of the people who matter most. I hope you're happy. I hope you're proud of yourself for being so petty and selfish. When you decide to stop this tantrum and come back to reality, you have a lot of apologies to make. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the others. They would all be more of the same. The narrative was set. I was the crazy one. I was the villain. I was the ungrateful mother who'd abandoned her loving family. Just as I set the phone down on the oak table, it began to ring, buzzing angrily against the wood. The screen glowed with Brandon's face, a photo from years ago when he still smiled at me with genuine warmth. My heart hammered against my ribs. A lifetime of conditioning screamed at me to answer, to smooth things over, to absorb his anger and make it all okay, to apologize for having needs, for having boundaries, for daring to value myself. But the woman who did that, I realized, no longer lived here. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. The phone fell silent, leaving a ringing in my ears. For a long moment, I didn't move. The ghost of its vibration still tingled in my palm. My house was so quiet, a deep, velvety silence that felt like a weighted blanket after years of noise. The television always blaring, Mason's squeals, Amber's endless chattering phone calls where she performed her perfect life for her followers. Here, the only sound was the gentle hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. I pushed myself up from the table and went to the pantry. The shelves were mostly bare, save for a few cans of soup and an unopened box of saltine crackers. It was more than enough. I heated a can of Campbell's tomato soup, the same kind my own mother used to make for me on rainy afternoons when I was a child. I sat down at my table again and ate slowly, savoring the simple, uncomplicated saltiness. It was the first meal I had eaten in years that wasn't a negotiation, a compromise, or a performance. It was just food. It was mine. With a little strength restored, I picked up my phone again. The urge to block Brandon's number was immense, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. This wasn't over. This was a controlled demolition, and I had to see it through to the end. I decided to check Facebook to assess the full extent of the damage to my public reputation. It was worse than I could have imagined. Brandon had posted again, about an hour ago. This time, the picture was of Lorraine Preston, my perfect counterpart, sitting on the floor of Mason's playroom. She had a look of beatific patience on her face as she helped Mason build a tower of blocks. The lighting was soft and warm. It looked like a magazine advertisement for idealized grandmotherhood. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive warfare. Feeling so incredibly grateful tonight for the people who truly understand what it means to be family. When some people walk away, others step up and show you what unconditional love really looks like. Teaching Mason an important lesson tonight. Real family doesn't abandon you when things get tough. Real family is your rock. Thank you, Lorraine, for being our rock. Always. He had tagged Lorraine, Amber, and a dozen other relatives. The comments were already flooding in. Lorraine, you are a saint. So sorry you're going through a tough time, Brandon. Sending love. That's what real grandmas do. Mason is so lucky to have her. A few people, mostly my friends from Cleveland, had posted confused questions. Is everything okay with Diane? But their comments were being ignored, buried under an avalanche of praise for Saint Lorraine, the savior. I read the words, and I didn't feel the hot sting of tears I would have expected. I felt nothing. It was like looking at a stranger's medical chart. Diagnosis clear, prognosis terminal. The connection between my son and me was not just broken, it was septic. The only solution was amputation. This post was my permission slip. It absolved me of any lingering guilt, any misplaced sense of maternal obligation. This wasn't a cry for help from a stressed-out son. This was a calculated act of malice. This was Brandon standing over my reputation with a shovel, burying it for all the world to see. My finger, steady now, tapped his contact icon. I pressed call. He answered on the first ring. His voice was not angry, but dripping with a cold, condescending disappointment. It was the voice he used on Mason when the boy misbehaved in public. The voice that said, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed," which somehow felt worse than rage. "Well, look who decided to call back," he said. "I hope you've had time to think about what you've done." I walked into my living room and sank into Tony's old armchair. The worn leather sighed under my weight, familiar and comforting. I was on my home turf now. "I'm in Cleveland, Brandon," I said. My voice was even, devoid of the emotion he was expecting. "I'm home." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "What? What do you mean you're home?" "Don't be ridiculous. Your home is here with us, with Mason." "No," I said simply. "My home is in Ohio. I've been living in your house, but I was never home. I am now." "This is insane," he sputtered, the condescension cracking to reveal the panic underneath. "You can't just leave. What are we supposed to do? Who is going to pick up Mason from school tomorrow? I have a 3 p.m. meeting I can't miss." "That sounds like a problem you or his mother will have to solve," I said calmly. "Or perhaps Lorraine can step up again. She seems to be enjoying her new role as the family's rock." "Oh, so this is about Lorraine," he shrieked, his voice rising to a pitch I'd never heard before. "I knew it. You've always been jealous of her, of my relationship with her." "This isn't about Lorraine," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "This is about a $25 gift card. This is about being called greedy in front of our entire family. This is about you using my life savings to throw a party for your mother-in-law and then publicly humiliating me on my own birthday." "Oh my God, it was a joke," he yelled. "A joke. You were so sensitive. And we were going to pay you back that money. We've just been waiting for the right time." "When, Brandon?" I asked, my voice cutting through his excuses like a blade. "When were you going to pay it back? Before or after you sold my house here to fund your new kitchen remodel?" The silence on the line was now absolute. I had scored a direct hit. He hadn't known I was aware of that plan. The plan I'd overheard him discussing on the phone with Amber when they thought I was napping. He recovered quickly, changing tactics. His voice softened, becoming wet with manufactured tears. "Mom, I don't understand why you're doing this. We need you. I need you. Don't you care that your son is hurting?" The old Diane would have buckled at the first sign of vulnerability. The old Diane would have melted, apologized, promised to come back. But the new Diane could see the puppet strings, could see the manipulation as clearly as if it were written in neon lights. "The only thing you need from me, Brandon, is my labor and my money," I said, "and you're not getting either one anymore." His voice hardened instantly. The fake tears evaporated like they'd never existed. "Fine," he hissed. "You want to be transactional? Let's be transactional. You completely ruined your own birthday party. You left me with a house full of guests and no food. Lorraine had to save the day and order catering from Maggiano's. It was incredibly expensive. The bill was $950. I almost laughed. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was almost a work of art. She paid it because she's a genuinely generous person, Brandon continued, his voice gaining momentum. But it's not right that she should be out of pocket because of your little temper tantrum. We've discussed it, and you owe her that money. You can send it to me, and I'll make sure she gets it. I leaned my head back against the worn leather of Tony's armchair. I looked at a crack in the ceiling plaster, a line that looked like a river on a map. A river leading away from here, leading towards something new. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. He had finally given me the gift I'd been waiting for, the gift of absolute certainty. "No," I said. "What do you mean, no?" he demanded. "You have to pay it back. It's your fault." "That's an interesting perspective," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "But I'm a little preoccupied with a different transaction right now. Let's talk about the $75,000 I loaned you for Lorraine's country club party and her European cruise." "We were going to pay you back," he repeated, his voice shrill now. "Good," I said, enunciating each word with perfect clarity. "I'm glad to hear that. Your deadline is 72 hours. "What? I want my $75,000 back," I said. "You have 72 hours to wire the full amount into my checking account. I trust you still have the details." "That's impossible," he shrieked. "We don't have that kind of money just lying around." "Then I suggest you get creative," I said. "You could ask your rock, or you could just figure it out. You're a resourceful man, Brandon. We can discuss the $950 for the catering after my $75,000 is safely in my bank account, not before." "This is blackmail," he spat. "You can't do this." "I can," I said, "and I am. Your 72 hours started the moment I said so. Have a good night, Brandon." And before he could scream or cry or argue, I hung up. I blocked his number immediately. Then I blocked Amber's number. I sat in the quiet, dusty darkness of my own house. The silence was broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car passing on the street outside. For the first time in a very, very long time, I was in control of my own life, and it felt like breathing again. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Drop a heart emoji if this resonates with you. The first morning back in my own house was a revelation. I woke not to the shrill beep of a 6 a.m. alarm set for Mason's school preparations, but to the gentle gray Ohio light filtering through the dusty panes of my bedroom window. For a full minute, I simply lay there, listening. There was no television droning on about morning traffic, no clatter of a cereal bowl hitting the counter, no demanding little voice calling for Diane. There was only the rustle of autumn leaves skittering across the roof and the distant coo of a mourning dove. It was the sound of peace. I made a pot of coffee, a dark, strong roast that Brandon had always called sludge. I drank it while sitting in Tony's armchair, looking out at my overgrown backyard. The grass needed mowing, the flower beds were full of weeds, but they were my weeds, my responsibility, my choice. I spent the day engaged in the simple, profound act of reclaiming my life. I opened windows, letting the crisp October air chase out the stale scent of disuse. I dusted surfaces that held the faint outlines of picture frames and knickknacks I'd packed away 4 years ago, thinking I'd never need them again. At the grocery store, I bought food just for me. A small, perfect ribeye steak, a carton of real, full-fat cream for my coffee, a wedge of sharp cheddar cheese, a bottle of red wine that cost more than $12. It felt decadent, almost illicit. For 4 years, every food purchase had been filtered through the lens of Brandon's family. Is it organic? Is it gluten-free? Will Amber photograph it well? Will Mason eat it, or will it end up in the trash? Today, the only question was, do I want this? The answer, again and again, was yes. The silence from my phone was a constant, welcome presence. Having blocked Brandon and Amber, I had effectively cut off the main artery of my anxiety. But I knew I couldn't exist on an island forever. There were other family members, people caught in the crossfire of Brandon's narrative. My sister Linda was chief among them. I needed to tell her the truth, or at least my version of it. I called her that afternoon, my stomach in a nervous knot. She answered immediately. "Diane, oh, thank God," she said, her voice tight with worry. "Are you okay? Brandon has been beside herself. He said you just disappeared, left without a note, vanished." "There was no note, Linda," I said calmly, sinking into a kitchen chair. "And I didn't vanish. I came home, but why? Brandon said you had some kind of breakdown, that he's worried you're not, well, not yourself." The gaslighting had already worked its magic. My son had already painted me as mentally unstable to the family. I took a slow, steadying breath. "Let me ask you something, Sue. What did David get you for your 60th birthday?" "What?" Linda sounded confused by the change in subject. "David took me to that new Italian place downtown, Giuliano's. It was lovely." "What does that have to do with anything?" "It sounds wonderful," I said, my voice even. "For my 62nd, Brandon gave me a $25 Starbucks card. And then, after I accepted it, he went on Facebook and told our entire extended family that I was greedy, that his mother-in-law, Lorraine, was a much better person because she would have refused such a gift. He did this publicly. 847 people saw it." Silence. I could hear the faint sound of the television on her end of the line, the clicking of her dog's nails on the hardwood floor. She did what?" Linda finally stammered. "And that was after," I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. "I had loaned him and Amber $75,000 from my retirement savings to pay for Lorraine's lavish 60th birthday party last year. So no, Linda, I didn't have a breakdown. I had a moment of clarity. I am not going back." The silence that followed was different. It was the sound of gears turning, of a narrative being forcibly rearranged, of my sister's understanding shifting beneath her feet. 75,000, Linda whispered. "Oh, Diane, he never mentioned that part." "He wouldn't," I said. "I'm sorry you were put in the middle of this. But I needed you to hear it from me. I'm so sorry, Diane," she said. And for the first time, she sounded like my sister again, not Brandon's confused aunt. My sister. I had no idea. We talked for another hour, and for the first time in years, I felt the comforting warmth of an ally, someone who believed me, someone who saw me. The next morning, as I was pruning the defiant weeds in my front garden, my phone rang. It was Linda again, but her voice was different, flustered, anxious. "Diane, I'm so sorry to bother you, but Brandon just called me. He was sobbing, hysterical. He said you blocked him and you're demanding $75,000 from them in 3 days. He said they'll be ruined, that they'll have to sell the house. He asked me to try and talk some sense into you. And what did you say?" I asked, snipping the head off a dandelion with vicious satisfaction. I told him I wouldn't get in the middle of it, Linda said, her voice rising in frustration. But he was relentless, crying about Mason, about how could you do this to your own grandson. "Thank you for telling me, Linda," I said firmly, "and thank you for not playing his game. This is between me and Brandon. If he contacts you again, you have my permission to hang up on him." After I hung up, I stood in my yard, feeling the sun on my face. The 72-hour clock was ticking, and the first countermove had been deflected. I had held the line. My next call was to my realtor, a cheerful, no-nonsense woman named Patty Miller. "Diane, so good to hear from you," she boomed when she answered. "I was just about to call. We've had 2 more inquiries on your property, and I think we can get an offer over asking if we move fast. You were so smart to list when you did." "Actually, Patty," I said, walking toward the for sale sign hammered into my lawn, "that's why I'm calling. I've had a change of plans." "Oh?" "I'm staying," I said, the words feeling more right than anything I'd said in years. "Please take the listing down. My house is no longer for sale." Patty was audibly surprised, but recovered quickly. "Well, okay then. Good for you, Diane. Welcome home." I hung up the phone and, with a grunt of effort, wrenched the sign out of the soft earth. I dragged it to the side of the house, out of sight. I was no longer liquidating my past to finance my son's future. My past, my present, and my future were all right here. As I walked back inside, wiping dirt from my hands, my phone rang again. An unfamiliar local number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Diane? Is that you?" "It's Evelyn. Evelyn Rodriguez from next door." Evelyn, of course. "How are you?" I said, picturing the kind, bird-watching woman who had been my neighbor for 2 decades. "I'm fine, dear, but listen, I don't have much time," she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "I saw you out in the yard just now, and then I checked the realtor's website and it says your listing is withdrawn. I was praying I'd catch you before you did something rash." "Rash?" "I'm not sure I follow," I said. "The house, Diane," she hissed, her excitement palpable even through the phone. "Don't you dare sell it to anyone. Not yet." "Evelyn, what on earth are you talking about?" There was a pause and I could hear her take a deep breath. "It's the Tech Vista project. You know that massive tech company from Seattle? My son works for the City Planning Commission, and he told me something in the strictest confidence. But Lord forgive me, I can't let you get cheated." I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly weak. "What are you saying?" "They're buying our entire block, Diane. The whole street. They're building their new Midwest headquarters right here. The official offers are coming next week." "Evelyn," I breathed. "How much?" my son said. She whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the secret, between $1.3 and $1.5 million per property. The world tilted sideways. Chapter 3. I ended the call with Evelyn, my hand still resting on the receiver. The kitchen was silent again, but this time it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the electric hum of a world knocked off its axis. I looked at the familiar crack in the ceiling, the worn linoleum on the floor, the sturdy oak table where I'd graded 1,000 papers and helped with 100 homework assignments. This wasn't just my house. It was a winning lottery ticket. It was my future. A dizzying, hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. For 4 months, I had been preparing to sacrifice this place, my only real asset, on the altar of my son's ambition. I was going to sell my history for a fraction of its worth to help a child who valued me at $25. And just as I chose to save myself, the universe had decided to reward me with a fortune. The next 3 days passed in a strange, dreamlike state. The 72-hour deadline I'd given Brandon loomed, a silent clock ticking in the back of my mind. But the terror and anxiety I would have once felt were gone, replaced by a crystalline sense of calm. The $75,000 was no longer a desperate plea. It was a line in the sand. I knew Brandon wouldn't pay it. The money was never a loan. It was an acquisition. And my son did not willingly give up his acquisitions. I spent the time nesting, not in preparation for a long winter, but for a new life. I bought new sheets for my bed, soft and expensive. I pulled Tony's old records from the attic and played them on the dusty turntable. The crackling vinyl filled the house with the ghosts of happier times. I bought a set of expensive oil paints, a hobby I'd abandoned when Brandon was a toddler, and time became a luxury I couldn't afford. I set up a canvas by the window in the spare bedroom, where the north light was perfect. With each small act of self-reclamation, I felt the meek, accommodating woman I had been for 62 years sloughing away like dead skin. On the 3rd day, at exactly 5 p.m., the deadline passed. As expected, there was no email notification from my bank, no frantic call from Linda saying the money was on its way. There was only silence. It was the final confirmation I needed. Brandon had defaulted, on both the financial debt and the moral one. I was in the garden, pulling the last of the season's tomatoes from their vines, when the next attack came. It was cleverer and far more cruel than I had anticipated. My phone rang, displaying a local Denver area code I didn't recognize. I answered, wary. "Hello? May I speak with Diane Castellano? A woman's voice asked. It was professional and tinged with concern. "This is she," I said. "Mrs. Castellano, this is the main office at Ridgemont Elementary School. We're calling because your grandson Mason is still here in the office. School was dismissed over an hour ago." My blood went cold. "We've been trying to reach his parents, Brandon and Amber," the woman continued, "but neither is answering their phone. You are listed as the primary emergency contact. We were hoping you could come and pick him up. He's the last one here, and he's getting very upset. The trap was brilliant. It was a direct strike at the most vulnerable part of me, my love for my grandson." The old Diane would have been consumed by guilt and panic. She would have apologized profusely and desperately started calling anyone in Denver who could help, falling right back into her role as the family's designated problem solver. But the old Diane was gone. I could see the chess move with perfect clarity. Brandon and Amber weren't answering their phones because they were choosing not to. This was their way of bypassing my blocked numbers, of forcing my hand, of using their own child as a human battering ram to break down the boundaries I had built. I pictured Mason's small, tear-streaked face, his confusion, his fear. My heart ached, physically ached, with the weight of what I was about to do. "Thank you for calling," I said, my voice steady, though it cost me a great deal to keep it so. "I am Mason's grandmother, but I need you to make a note in your records. I am currently in Ohio, where I reside permanently." "Oh," the secretary said, clearly taken aback. I see. So you're not able to pick him up?" "That is correct," I said, the words feeling like ice in my mouth. "I am no longer their local emergency contact. You will have to continue trying to reach his parents. This is their responsibility." My hand was shaking, but my voice was not. "You should also advise them to update their emergency contact forms immediately," I added. I hung up before the woman could reply. My heart was hammering. A wave of nausea washed over me. I ran to the bathroom and vomited, then sank to the cool tile floor, sobbing. Had I just traumatized my own grandson? Was I really the monster Brandon said I was? I stayed on that bathroom floor for 20 minutes, my body shaking with the force of my grief and guilt. But underneath it all, I knew the truth. Mason was in no real danger. His parents would swoop in at the last possible second, feigning a dead phone battery or a missed call, and play the heroes. The entire drama was staged for an audience of one, me, and I had refused to play my part. An hour later, as predicted, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was a single furious word: "How?" The email itself was a torrent of unhinged rage from Brandon. How could you do that? How could you abandon your own grandson? Mason was hysterical, alone and terrified at school for 2 hours because his grandmother, the only person he's ever been able to count on, decided to be a vindictive, selfish monster. Amber and I were in a critical meeting and our phones were off. The one time we needed you, the one time we counted on you as an emergency contact, you did this. Do you have any idea the damage you've done? He cried the whole way home, asking why Grandma Diane hated him. I hope you're satisfied. I hope destroying your family was worth it. I read the email twice. The lies were so blatant, so audacious. Critical meeting. Phones were off. It was a work of fiction, and a poorly written one at that. I did not feel anger. I did not feel guilt anymore. I felt a profound, cleansing sense of finality. Brandon had shown me his entire hand. He was willing to emotionally traumatize his own son to score a point against me. There was nothing left to salvage. I opened a reply. My fingers were steady on the keyboard. Subject: How? Brandon, your failure to retrieve your own child from school is your responsibility alone. Using Mason as a tool to manipulate me is as transparent as it is unacceptable. The 72-hour deadline for the return of my $75,000 has now passed without payment. This acknowledges your refusal to honor your debt. Do not contact me again. All future communication regarding this matter will come from my attorney. He will be in touch with you shortly. Diane Castellano. I hit send without reading it over. Then I opened a new browser tab and searched for top financial litigators in Cleveland, Ohio. A list of names and smiling, confident faces appeared on the screen. I picked up the phone and dialed the first one. The man on the other end of the line had a voice like polished oak, smooth, solid, and serious. Davies and Associates, Samuel Richardson speaking. Mr. Richardson, I said, my own voice sounding thin by comparison. My name is Diane Castellano. I was referred by the Cleveland Bar Association website. I need to hire an attorney regarding a personal loan that has gone into default. There was a brief pause. I understand, Mrs. Castellano. Our firm specializes in financial litigation. Why don't you tell me the basics of the situation? And so I did. Sitting in Tony's armchair, I laid out the last 4 years of my life with a clarity that surprised me. I spoke of the $75,000 transfer from my retirement account, providing the exact date. I described the verbal agreement for repayment. I detailed the events of my 62nd birthday, including the public humiliation on Facebook, the weaponization of my grandson, and the final audacious demand that I pay for the party I never had. I spoke without tears, without anger. I presented the facts as if I were a witness in someone else's case. When I finished, there was a long silence. I wondered if he was writing me off as just another messy family dispute, another emotional woman he'd have to manage. Mrs. Castellano, Mr. Richardson said finally, his voice holding a new note of respect. Family loans without written contracts can be challenging. However, a bank transfer of that size is a powerful piece of evidence, and the subsequent behavior you've described establishes a clear pattern of bad faith. I believe we have a strong case. I'd be happy to represent you. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. It was the first time in this whole ordeal that a professional, impartial observer had heard my story and validated it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't petty. I was a creditor. The next afternoon, I sat in Mr. Richardson's formal wood-paneled office, surrounded by law books and the weight of precedent. We drafted the demand letter together. It was a strange and empowering experience to see my pain and betrayal translated into the cold, unforgiving language of the law. Failure to remit, breach of verbal contract, further legal action. The letter was a shield and a sword. It would be sent via registered mail to Brandon and Amber's Denver address that same day. Walking out of the law office into the bright autumn afternoon, I felt a sense of finality. The last bridge to the woman I used to be, the woman who would have absorbed this loss, swallowed this pain, and eventually forgiven, was now a pile of ash. If you're rooting for Diane, subscribe to Weathered Rose Stories for more empowering journeys like this one. Hit that like button to let me know you're with her. The following week passed in a state of suspended animation. I waited for two things: a response to the lawyer's letter and the arrival of the offer from the Tech Vista project. I began to paint again. Really paint, not just dabble. I set up my easel in the spare room and found that my hands remembered the feel of the brushes, the smell of the turpentine, the way light could be captured in layers of color. I painted my backyard, the gnarled branches of the old oak tree, the defiant last roses of the season, their petals brown at the edges but still clinging to life. I was painting my life back into existence. On Tuesday, exactly 1 week after Evelyn's phone call, a courier van pulled up to my curb. A young woman delivered a stiff, oversized envelope with the sleek, minimalist logo of Tech Vista Corporation in the corner. My hands trembled as I took it inside. I laid it on the kitchen table, staring at my own name and address typed in crisp black font. This was it. For a moment, I was terrified to open it. What if Evelyn was wrong? What if it was a standard low-ball offer? What if this last piece of hope was just another disappointment? With a deep breath, I slid a butter knife under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a thick sheaf of documents bound in a heavy blue folder. The cover letter was on top. I scanned past the corporate jargon: urban revitalization, community partnership, exciting new chapter for Cleveland. My eyes searched for the only thing that mattered. And then I saw it. A number at the bottom of the page under the heading Purchase Offer. It was so large my brain couldn't quite process it at first. The number of zeros seemed to stretch on indefinitely. I read it once, then twice. I took off my reading glasses, wiped them on my shirt, and put them back on. The number remained the same, $1,425,000. I sank into my kitchen chair, the letter clutched in my hand. My vision blurred, and the tears I had refused to shed for my son now came in a hot, silent flood. They were not tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of shock, of vindication, of a staggering, incomprehensible relief. It was the sound of a cage door I didn't even know I was in, swinging silently open. It was more money than I had ever dreamed of. It was not just a safety net. It was a fortress. It was freedom. It was a new life handed to me in a blue folder. Later that evening, an email arrived from Brandon. The lawyer's letter had clearly found its mark. The rage was gone, replaced by a pleading, manipulative tone that was somehow even more insulting. Subject: you're destroying us. Mom, we got a letter from a lawyer. A lawyer. I can't believe you would do this to your own family. This is a private matter. Why would you bring strangers into this? Are you trying to make us homeless? Bankrupt us? Mason would have to change schools. We'd lose everything we've worked for. Is that what you want? To see your only child destitute? After everything we've been through, I can't believe this is who you are. This isn't you. Please call off your lawyer and let's just talk. I stared at the email. The old me would have been shredded by the guilt, would have second-guessed everything, would have wondered if I was being too harsh. But the woman sitting at her kitchen table with $1 million offer in a folder next to her was immune. I did not reply. I simply clicked forward, typed in srichardson@davieslaw.com, and hit send. Then I moved Brandon's email from my inbox to the trash and went back to my painting. There was nothing more to say. My past was now in the hands of my lawyer. My future was my own. The next morning, I had a scheduled call with Mr. Richardson. He was brisk and efficient. "Good morning, Diane," he began. "I received the email you forwarded from your son. It's a classic emotional appeal designed to make you feel guilty and retract your legal position. It's actually a sign of weakness, not strength. My advice is to continue to ignore all direct communication." "That's the plan," I said, swirling the coffee in my mug. "Good. Now, we need to discuss next steps. Litigation can be a lengthy process, especially with family involved. I need to be assured you have the resources to see this through if they decide to stonewall us. Legal fees can add up quickly." I took a sip of my coffee, a small secret smile playing on my lips. "Mr. Richardson," I said, "I believe my financial situation has just become significantly less precarious. I received an offer for my property yesterday." "Oh?" he said, his professional interest piqued. "From a private buyer?" "From Tech Vista Corporation," I replied. "They're buying the entire block for a new campus. The offer is for $1,425,000. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I could almost hear the gears turning in his sharp legal mind. When he spoke again, the entire tone of the conversation had shifted. The cautious, pragmatic lawyer was gone, replaced by a confident strategist. "Diane," he said slowly, "this changes everything. You are in a position of immense power. We are no longer simply trying to recover a debt. We are going to ensure it is paid. With your permission, I'd like to take a more assertive approach." "I'm listening," I said. "Given their refusal to cooperate," he explained, "I will immediately file a lien on their property in Denver for the full $75,000 plus accrued interest and legal fees. It will attach to their deed. They won't be able to sell, refinance, or get a home equity loan without satisfying the debt to you first. We will effectively put a legal clamp on their single biggest asset, a lien. It was a cold, hard legal word. It was the perfect instrument, a boundary made of steel. Do it, I said without hesitation. The weeks that followed were the most liberating of my life. I met with a financial advisor Mr. Richardson recommended, a sharp, kind woman named Patricia Chen, who helped me map out a future I'd never allowed myself to imagine. I accepted the Tech Vista offer and began the process of selling the house I had once thought I would die in. I packed the things that mattered: Tony's books, my mother's china, my old photo albums, the paintings I'd created in my spare bedroom. I let go of the rest. I didn't hear a word from Denver. The lien had done its work, transforming their emotional blackmail into a straightforward business problem. Their tantrums and accusations were useless against a legal filing. They had been silenced. About a month later, an email arrived from Mr. Richardson. Subject: resolution. Dear Diane, this is to inform you that I was contacted this morning by an attorney representing Brandon and Amber Castellano. After reviewing their options, my clients have elected to satisfy the lien on their property. A wire transfer in the amount of $81,340, representing the original loan, accrued interest, and all legal fees, has been credited to your account as of 10:15 a.m. this morning. The matter is now closed. Sincerely, Samuel Richardson. I read the email, then opened my banking app. There was the number sitting cleanly in my checking account. I felt no surge of triumph, no desire to gloat. I simply felt quiet. It was the sound of a door clicking shut on a dark room I never had to enter again. The debt was paid, financial and moral. The story was over, 6 months later. The light in Florence was different. It was softer, older, a warm honey that seemed to cling to the ancient stones of the Ponte Vecchio. I sat at a small table at an outdoor cafe, a half-finished glass of Chianti at my elbow. A leather-bound sketchbook lay open on the table. Inside was a messy, joyful charcoal drawing of the Duomo. After the house sale closed, I had bought a bright, modern condominium in a new development in downtown Cleveland, one with a huge north-facing window, perfect for an art studio. I'd reconnected with my sister Linda and my old book club. I had a life again, one that was entirely, wonderfully my own. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was a picture from Linda of her holding a tiny sleeping baby wrapped in a blue blanket, her first grandchild. Diane, he's here. William Anthony, named after our dads. I smiled, my heart swelling with a pure, uncomplicated happiness. I typed back my congratulations, sent a string of heart emojis, and then I did something new. I put the phone away in my purse. Years ago, I would have felt a pang of jealousy, a sorrow for the grandmother-grandchild relationship I had lost. Years ago, I would have spent the rest of the afternoon staring at the picture, wondering what I had done wrong. But now, I simply took a sip of my wine and looked at the beautiful, chaotic, sun-drenched scene in front of me. The tourists, the lovers, the street vendors, the distant sound of an accordion playing a melody I didn't recognize but somehow knew by heart. I picked up my charcoal pencil. I had a world to capture. Sometimes, late at night in my Cleveland condo, I thought about Mason, wondered if he remembered me, wondered if Brandon had poisoned him against me completely, or if somewhere in his growing mind he held a memory of the grandmother who had loved him fiercely, even when loving him meant letting go. The ache was there, would always be there. But it was a clean pain now, not an infected wound. I couldn't save Mason without sacrificing myself. And I had learned, finally, at 62 years old, that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they're the ones holding the match. I had learned what real strength looks like. It isn't enduring mistreatment. It isn't absorbing everyone's dysfunction and calling it love. Strength is walking away from people who diminish you, even when, especially when, those people are family. Real family doesn't weaponize your love. Real family doesn't price your worth at $25. Real family doesn't steal your future to fund their present. I had learned about courage, too. Courage isn't the absence of guilt. Courage is acting in your own defense even when guilt is screaming in your ears. I felt guilty leaving Denver, felt guilty blocking Brandon's number, felt guilty refusing to rescue Mason from that school, felt guilty taking legal action against my own son. I did it all anyway. That's courage and peace. I had learned about peace. Real peace isn't achieved by keeping everyone else happy at the expense of your own soul. Peace comes from no longer betraying yourself to maintain false harmony. For 62 years, I had kept the peace by absorbing everyone's dysfunction. I was a human shock absorber. That wasn't peace. That was self-erasure. Real peace was sitting in a Florence cafe, alone, and feeling whole. I opened my sketchbook to an earlier page. There was a drawing I'd made in my first week back in Cleveland. I'd drawn it from memory. Brandon's kitchen, the abandoned pots on the stove, Tony's apron folded on the counter. I'd titled it, The Last Meal. Looking at it now with different eyes, I could see the truth. That kitchen was a beautiful prison. That meal was ransom I'd been paying for years, thinking it would buy me love. Walking away from it had been walking into freedom. I didn't know what had happened to Brandon and Amber after the lien was satisfied. I didn't follow them on social media. I didn't ask Linda for updates. I didn't want to know. Their lives were no longer my concern. I wasn't punishing them with silence. I was protecting myself with boundaries. There's a difference. Linda visited me in Cleveland once a month now. We had wine nights and talked about everything and nothing. She never asked, "Do you miss him?" She knew some questions have no good answers. Instead, she asked, "Are you happy?" My answer was always the same. I'm getting there. And I was. My spare bedroom was now a full-time art studio, canvases stacked against the walls, the smell of oil paint and turpentine. I painted every morning from 6 a.m. to noon. No interruptions, no demands, no guilt. I painted Cleveland cityscapes, Lake Erie sunsets, portraits from memory. I painted Tony once from an old photograph. I cried while painting it, but I finished it. I hung it in my bedroom. I'm living for both of us now, I told his painted face sometimes, when the condo was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts. I had rejoined my old book club, the same women I'd left behind 4 years ago when I moved to Denver. They welcomed me back without judgment. "We missed you, Di," they said simply. These women had watched me disappear into Brandon's life. They were watching me emerge from it now. They understood what I had survived. That understanding was worth more than gold. I was planning a longer trip to Italy next spring, 6 weeks, maybe 8. I would take art classes in Tuscany, stay in a small village, paint olive groves and vineyards and the faces of people who didn't know my history. Maybe I'd never come back. Maybe I'd make Italy my home. The point was, I could. I had the resources, the freedom, the time. The world was open to me in a way it never had been before. I had lost a son. That was true, but I had gained, finally and completely, myself. And that was a trade I would make again in a heartbeat. Brandon had taken 4 years of my life, taken $195,000 of my money, taken my labor, my dignity, my peace. But he couldn't take who I fundamentally was. And when I finally chose myself, when I finally said enough, the universe had rewarded me. Not because I deserved it more than anyone else, but because I was finally ready to receive it. I finished my Chianti and closed my sketchbook. I left euros on the table, stood, and stretched. The warm Italian sun was on my face. I was wearing a linen dress I'd bought for myself, comfortable sandals, and Tony's old watch. I walked across the Ponte Vecchio and stopped in the middle of the bridge. I looked down at the Arno River flowing beneath me. The river didn't stop, didn't apologize, didn't look back. It just flowed forward. That's what I was doing now, flowing forward toward myself, toward joy, toward peace. Finally, home. I had been a weathered rose, battered by storms, petals torn, stem bent nearly to breaking. But weathered roses are survivors. They know something the pristine blooms in the greenhouse don't. They know that beauty isn't diminished by struggle, it's deepened by it. And Diane Castellano, at 62 years old, was just beginning to bloom. Has someone in your life ever made you feel invisible? Have you had to make the difficult choice to walk away from family for your own well-being? Share your story in the comments below. Your courage might inspire someone else to reclaim their own life. And if Diane's journey moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Weathered Rose Stories for more tales of resilience, strength, and self-discovery. Remember, it's never too late to choose yourself.